Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soul Stained Ink. My name is Beth, and I am here today with some suggestions for books you might enjoy during HallowTween, the Halloween middle grade readathon that I am co hosting with two of my favorite friends, Storm and Lee. This is Storm's baby, and she invited Lee and I along this year, and I am so very excited. Please ignore my puppies who are wrestling with each other in the background. Nothing is wrong. They're just a couple of months old and enjoy baiting each other a whole bunch. So we do have a bingo board, and I'm going to attempt to connect these books with our bingo board for you. These are books that I have read and enjoyed and think you might as well. And several of them are, in fact, for people who might not enjoy something super spooky during the Halloween season, but still want a little bit of that magic. So my video editor has not been working very well lately. I'm just going to hold up the bingo board for you to see. Our first one is retro spooky, which means something that came out before like 2003. I don't know. Something like that. Think before the 2000s. This book, nope, this one was in 2007. Hold on. Let's try that again. This book, The Ghost That Came Alive by Vic Kroom, came out in 1975. And this is about some children who are in a creepy old house during a rainstorm. And now it seems like the house has a ghost. They can hear her voice late at night. Something strange is going on. They are determined to figure out what their hosts are up to. They have to solve the mystery or they're going to be trapped in the house forever. It's definitely a little spooky, but it is early middle grade, and the spook is not too terrible. Now, if you don't want one that is spooky really at all, Can I Get There by Candlelight by Jean Slaughter Doty, I believe. I've loved it far too much. This book came out in 1980, and it is one of my childhood favorites. I may, in fact, reread this for the magic. But basically, this girl, Gail, has her horse, Candlelight, and they're at a carriage house. That's all that's left of this old country estate. Her parents have just rented it. The big house was torn down long ago. Woods have sprung up where the lawns and the gardens grew. However, beyond the woods, fields stretch for miles that are perfect for riding. But then Gail steps through the iron gate near the edge of the woods, and instead of fields, she looks across a wide lawn to an enormous house. Running toward her is a girl wearing a dress from 100 years ago. Somehow, Gail has gone back in time. Can she return to the present, or will she and Candy be caught in the past forever? There's a little bit of spook. There's a little bit of like, who's a ghost, who's not a ghost, what's going on. It's absolutely gorgeously written. I loved it a whole lot growing up, and I may go ahead and reread it, like I said. This one is Help, I'm a Prisoner in the Library by Eth Clifford, illustrated by George Hughes. This is a younger middle grade, possibly actually a children's chapter book, but it's a little bit higher children's chapter, but definitely for ages like 7, 8, 9. And Mary Rose and Jo Beth hardly ever agree on anything. They both thought the night would never end. So much had happened. First, their car ran out of gas in an unfamiliar city. Then, after their father left in search of a gas station, they trudged through the snow until they found a curious old library that housed the most extraordinary objects. Wooden children dressed in old-fashioned clothes, a terrible flying creature that rushed at them in the dark, and they would later learn a cellar full of animals. Worst of all, they were locked in. When they finally stumbled upon the librarian, they were convinced their troubles had just begun. If we ever get out of here alive, I'm never ever in my whole life going to tell people about this place, insisted Jo Beth firmly. Who would believe it? But whether you believe in banshees and haunted houses like Jo Beth, or like Mary Rose, you look for more logical explanation for those strange occurrences that befell the girls that long winter night, we promise you will be beguiled from beginning to end by the characters and events in this funny, spirited romp of a story that ends happily for all and leaves the two sisters with a freshly acquired respect for each other. It's very cute, and there are a couple of little jump scare areas, but not terrible. Now, this one is kind of a middle grade, kind of maybe a young adult, but it's the Dracula Murders. Again, you can tell it has been well beloved and might also get a reread. This is by Philip Daniels and was published in 1983. The Festival of Horror Ball at the Country Club was a great success, with everyone dressed as vampires, werewolves, and assorted monsters. The fun was interrupted by a spectral figure calling himself Nosferatu, who warned the merrymakers they were tampering with the unknown. People dismissed him as a crank until a girl was ritualistically murdered on the golf course. Superintendent Vine took charge of what one national paper called the Dracula Murders. There were further murders, and the Dracula label stuck. The authorities summoned Professor Cornfield, expert on Eastern European history. Vine stuck to the police routine, but Cornfield looked outside. He set out to track down Nosferatu. A bizarre bargain was struck, a bargain between the living and the undead. This one is a little bit creepier, and like I said, possibly more of a young adult than a middle grade, but it is a young adult from the 80s, and so none of that extra stuff that is typically in them now is really in this one. And then we have the 3 books from my favorite adult author, the 3 middle grade books that he produced. Now, the thing is, if you're looking at the US copies, it does tell you that they were published, copywritten in the United States in the 2000s. However, these came out in the early 90s in Spain, I believe. So where Carlos Ruiz Zafón was living. And they are The Prince of Mist, The Watcher in the Shadows, and The Midnight Palace. Now, all of his books do have some connection with each other, whether it be stories that are mentioned, places that are mentioned, things like that, but you can read them as standalones. Prince of the Mist says it's wartime and the Carver family decides to leave the capital city where they live and move to a small coastal village. But from the minute they cross the threshold of their new home, strange things begin to happen. In that mysterious house lurks the spirit of a young boy who died by drowning. Max and Alicia Carver began to explore the strange circumstances of that death and discover the existence of a mysterious being called the Prince of Mist, a diabolical character who has returned from the shadows to collect on a debt from the past. With the help of their new friend Roland, the Carvers soon get caught up in an adventure of sunken ships and enchanted statues, an adventure that will change their lives forever. The Watcher in the Shadows says, it was an unforgettable summer. 14-year-old Irene Soivel's family has just moved to the foggy coast of Normandy. There, living on the estate of a reclusive toy maker and inventor, she's immediately enchanted by the beauty of the place and the local wealth of ghost stories. When a young girl is found murdered, her body at the end of a path torn through the woods by a monstrous, inhuman force, Irene begins to wonder, is there more to the ghost stories than the townspeople let on? What exactly is the inventor guarding so closely in his mansion? She will have to survive the most terrifying summer of her life, trying to piece together the many mysteries and secrets hidden in a town torn apart by tragedy amid a labyrinth of light and shadows. And then this final one, The Midnight Palace, says, in The Midnight Palace begins on a dark night in 1930s Calcutta when an English lieutenant fights to save newborn twins, Ben and Sheer, from an unthinkable menace. Despite monsoon-forced rains and terrible danger looking around every street corner, the young lieutenant manages to get them to safety, but not without losing his own life. Years later, on the eve of Ben and Sheer's 16th birthday, the mysterious threat re-enters their lives. This time it may be impossible to escape. With the help of their friends, the twins will have to battle the terror that watches them in the shadows of the night and face the most frightening creature in the history of the City of Palaces. So if you haven't read any Carlos Ruiz Zafón, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but he writes in a very twisty, beautifully lyrical, psychological manner. And so these are creepy, and there are some kind of gory elements to them, but they are so well done, and it just pulls you in, and you want to keep reading them. So those are the books that I have to suggest for retro reads for HallowTween coming to you in October.